Hey everyone, and welcome to the Voices of Boyle podcast. My name is Carlo Cortaro, and this is episode number 3. Today I chatted with James Candon, who's well known around Boyle, and he was also a prominent businessman for most of his life. James talks about his early days growing up in Boyle, his family's friendship with Boyle's last town crier, Ned Kelly, and he also spills the beans on his various involvements with organisations and clubs in the town. I thoroughly enjoyed the chat with James, and I hope you enjoy listening to some of his stories too. James, how are you keeping today?
Not too bad at all.
Good. Well, listen, James, thanks very much for taking the time to invite me into your home to record our conversation. So to kick things off, would you be able to just tell us a little bit about where you were born and what it was like growing up in Boyle back in those days as a young fella?
Sure. I was born in 1943 in a nursing home in Dublin. Back to Boyle and went to Convent National School across the road. And subsequently, I went to Deer Park School for the rest of the national school period. From there, I went to St Mary's College in Boyle for 3 years, and I ended up the last 2 years of my secondary school experience in Blackrock College in Dublin. Now, that I didn't really fit in very well in Blackrock in that I wasn't too sporty at the time, and if you weren't sporty, you didn't really figure too much in the activities in the college. The only thing I can remember positive about it was in the first year I was there, I got top of my year in 5th year. After secondary school, I went to serve my time to the tea trade in Belfast, work with a company called Twinings, a subsidiary of Twinings, who were big in the tea trade in England. And I can always remember the first job I was given was working with an old man who was putting lids on tea chests. And the first question he said to me is, "Where do you come from, boy?" I said, "I come from Boyle in County Roscommon, sir." "Do you know Big Clark?" was the next question. Big Clark in question turned out to be my father-in-law later in the years. But he worked in Twinings in the 30s and played in goals for Belfast Celtic.
So that was a mad coincidence that he...
Oh, total coincidence, and I can still remember the question coming very, very clearly.
And at that stage, you obviously maybe didn't know your future wife at that.
I wasn't aware of her. I served my time into the tea trade for 2 years in this company, and I went to Queen's University at night studying economics and politics. And then after 2 years, I transferred from part-time to full-time in Queen's. And I got a degree in economics and politics. And I was president of the Economic Society in my last year. So that brought me back to Boyle, and I worked with my father for 4 or 5 years until he died. The business was very diverse in that it was wholesale grocery, we used to pack butter, animal feed milling, and sugar brokery. I got involved in that and enjoyed every minute of it. We would have had 35 staff. And one of the fondest memories I have of it is we had 2 horses and carts drawing product from the station down to the warehouse in Patrick Street and delivering to all the customers around about the town, like the Royal Hotel, the various shops around about. We had a number of trucks delivering to shops around the country, and the bulk of the business would have been with small country shops within a radius of about 40 miles of Boyle.
So that was the kind of delivery radius, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people in Boyle remember the horse and cart delivery.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and that was a local feature.
Yeah, we had 2 horses, an Irish draft and another draft horse, and two drivers. One was Jimmy McGarry, who drove a red horse, and Peter McLaughlin, who drove the black Irish draft.
And interestingly enough, Richard, who was on episode 1 of this, was also mentioning to me that his grandfather, I think, was a driver for your dad back then, was that correct?
It was. Frank Lloyd was a driver. And Frank drove one of the trucks that I remember. It was a Thames 7-ton truck, flat-bodied. And in addition, he used to drive my grandmother down to Ballinafad every Sunday in my father's car to spend the Sunday afternoon with her two sisters, one of whom was married in Ballinafad.
Okay. One of the features as well, or which I think was a great marketing idea back in those days for your dad and his business, was that he gave customers a calendar each year. Was that around Christmas time?
It would have been around Christmas. And it was a unique calendar in that it had very large print and no photographs. Literally, you could hang it up anywhere in the room and you would be able to pick whatever information you wanted from it. It was the size and the standard of the print was very, very unique.
And was it just the actual days, the 1 to 30 or whatever calendar?
Yeah.
That was it. There was no, and you could maybe write in, the person could write in maybe significant dates for themselves on that, right? And no photos, because that's what I was going to ask you, was there any photos involved? And if there was, who took them? But obviously there was no photos.
No photos.
Okay, no, that's interesting. And dinner dances were a big thing back in those days.
The dinner dances were mainly organised by the Chamber of Commerce.
Back then? Right.
And they were very formal in that you dressed up in a black outfit with dicky bows, and the ladies were very, very glamorously fashioned as well. They were mainly held in the Forest Park Hotel.
Right, that's where I was going. Yeah, Forest Park, that was the main hub for...
Yeah.
Up until, obviously, it was the main hub for a lot of things up until it closed back in, I think it was the 90s, was it, I think?
Sometime in the 90s.
Yeah. So how many staff did you say there were in the...
We would have 30 and 35 staff.
So that was a significant number. If you take into effect Nair Factory, was that going around the same time?
It started up in the 60s.
Right. So you would have had Nair Factory, you would have had Stewart's Mill,
yeah.
You would have had the Hurl Works,
yes,
and you would also have had your dad's business.
Yes.
So I'd say come 6 o'clock every evening, you would have had maybe over 100 people, workers maybe coming in that road back into the centre of town.
Indeed.
It must have been a sight when you think now, that area of town is kind of, in a way, desolate. There's not much activity happening there.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that was a kind of a focal point of the town, I think, back in those days.
Oh, very much.
And just getting back to then maybe your earlier days growing up in Boyle, James, do you remember any of the fair days that used to have, I think it was the Crescent that was...
Well, the Crescent was jammed with cattle right around the south end of the Crescent, and large numbers of cattle and dealers walking around picking them up. And it literally controlled the town for the full day. You got nothing else done.
Was it a one-day event or was it a weekend?
It was a one-day event.
And they used to come from all around, I'd say.
I couldn't honestly say, but there was a hell of a lot of people involved. And I can picture cattle tied up going around the whole south side of the Crescent, and farmers coming and going all the time.
And back then I don't know, I can't remember, obviously, was it the same time frame, but was there grass on the Crescent back then?
No.
No, there wasn't. That was prior to that.
I don't remember grass on the Crescent.
Yeah, because I do remember there was, it's probably a long time before then even, but there was at some stage grass on the Crescent. I think I remember seeing some photos, but I'm not sure. You mentioned then, you didn't go to school then in the Mockmoyne school?
We went to Deer Park. About 6 or 8 of us went to Deer Park School. I'm not exactly sure why, but I'd say basically because it was run by a Master Finan who was very strict and kept us under control all the time. We used to go by taxi with the Burns taxi to Deer Park School in the morning, and that taxi would then go down towards Castleballen to pick up pupils for the Church of Ireland School in Boyle as well. So he had to run up and down, and then we would, after school, we would walk home or run home, and mainly downhill down the Curlews, about 3 miles. And that probably got me involved in running over the years.
So you started the running at what age, roughly?
I would have been 12, 13.
And you competed, did you compete regionally or was it further afield?
I eventually ended up running 4 marathons.
4?
Yeah.
Back in those days, right?
I would have been about 30 or 40 years of age. And there was quite a few people from Boyle running marathons at the time.
Was there? Well, what was, like, obviously nowadays you see how much running, how popular running has got. But back then, it wouldn't have been as popular an activity.
Oh, not at all.
Yeah, so very few people would have been, in those days, been able to say they'd even trained for a marathon, let alone run 4.
Yeah, I'd say that in Boyle there would have been about 6 other people altogether over the period that I was involved.
Do you remember the Fleadh Cheoil that were Boyle? Was 1960 and 66?
I certainly do.
Great days, I'd say.
Oh, it was a lovely summer weekend, and quite a few of my friends from Belfast came down. There was a marquee in what is now known as the Pleasure Grounds, and I can remember there was a ceilidh there on one night, and about 2 o'clock in the morning, 2 young fellas came in and had a dead fox under their arm and scared the shit out of everybody. But the town was completely jammed, music everywhere. It was one of the most wonderful days I've ever experienced in Boyle.
Yeah, I always remember Tony Conboy in school teaching me, and he used to always tell us what he'd describe the Fleadh Cheoil back in those days in Boyle was you could walk from the top of the town to the bottom of town on heads the whole way down. Yes. It was that tightly
absolutely,
jammed.
Yeah. It was thousands upon thousands of people.
And it was a music festival. That's primarily what it was.
Irish music festival.
I'd say it was just spectacular because even a few weeks ago I went down to Tubbercurry to their fair day.
Yeah, right.
And there must have been 10,000 people there. It was a scorching hot day. And I was just thinking, would this have been something that it was like back in the 60s in Boyle with just people everywhere enjoying themselves, happy out?
Exactly, yeah.
Mum asked me to ask you 2 things that she brought up. My mum was a great source of information for me with these things. But she says back in the early 80s, she can remember is that you had a dog that used to go up to Dinton and Moriarty's, which was on the Crescent there, and collect the newspaper every day for you and bring it back down to you.
Yeah.
What breed of a dog was it?
It was a golden Labrador, and we called him Ned.
Right, okay. And how did you, did it take him long to train him to do that, or how did that come about that he was able to go up and...
Well, I was living in Great Meadow at the time, and I used to cycle down from Great Meadow to the shop in Patrick Street in the morning, and the dog would run down the street on the footpath the whole way down. And I used to stop for the paper, but with repetition and repetition and rewarding when he would do what he was told, eventually got used to collecting the paper himself.
And he took it from there.
Yeah.
So every morning, was it?
Every morning.
So you'd when you get up or when the shop was open, you'd say, Ned, go down with paper. And he'd just go off and do that.
Yeah.
That's amazing. If you saw that today, it'd be a little feat. But to do it back then as well, he was
a wonderful dog.
Really. And how long had you that dog for?
I had him about 14 years.
Lovely. Now that's a great little memory.
I remember one day he was coming down the Crescent, and Peter Phelan, who had the shop next door to Moriarty's, was coming out, and he ran straight into Peter and put him up in the air.
The other thing Mum mentioned to me was your wife Kathleen was on the Late Late Show many years ago.
Right.
And she told, I think it was Gay Burnett would have been, that her husband, yourself, she told me it was a small bike with big wheels, but I don't think that was the case.
It was a tall bike with small wheels.
Tall bike with small wheels.
And it was an English bike brand, Moulton, Moulton. And in those days, bicycles were big, hefty tools with 28-inch wheels. This had a 14-inch wheel for front and back. And it was very fashionable at the time. I bought it when I was in Belfast. And people were talking about it for years afterwards.
So what time frame had you at? Would you have cycled it every day around Boyle?
Yes.
What time frame was that? Wouldn't have been
from 1960, 1971, 72.
Okay, that era.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because my memories of you growing up was always, you were always cycling on a bike.
Yeah.
And you'd always pass me by in the street and go, how are you, Carla? That's always remember. And I was just thinking, was that the bike? Because back then, being a young fella, I wouldn't have noticed.
It probably wasn't.
Yeah, I don't think it would have been. Yeah.
But it was very, very much a talking point for you when it came to Boyle first. It wasn't a bicycle like it for years.
Yeah. And back then you wouldn't see, even nowadays, you wouldn't see bikes that are very different these days. Moving on to a very interesting topic that I'm interested in is I came across, only because I read Christy Wynn's blog posts a few years ago, was Boyle had a town crier back, and it was a character known as Ned Kelly, who your family, I found out, was very good friends with, particularly your father. For anyone that doesn't know, Ned Kelly was Boyle's last town crier, and he was, I think you could describe him as an officer of Parliament, where he would walk on the streets with public announcements, latest news, bylaws, proclamations. And the role of a town crier, I believe, was because sections of society, not just in Boyle, but town criers across Ireland, a section of society was illiterate. And that was the kind of main reason a town crier was had a role in the first place.
Right.
But how did the friendship with your dad and Ned come about, James?
Ned was brought up in the working house in Sligo, but he was eventually kicked out of the workhouse when he reached adulthood. And he met my father one day. He was trying to erect a tent on the shores of the Boyle River at Assilin, and my father was down having a swim in Assilin the same day, and they got talking and they developed a friendship. Ned wouldn't have been the brightest individual, but he was a town crier in Boyle and in Sligo and had a great voice. But he was very friendly and very committed to my father. So my father was big into shooting and hunting, and every so often he would have part friends down from Dublin and otherwhere, and Ned would always be involved socially with those people, looking after them, and so much so that he felt that he was part of our family. And my father tells a story that a friend of his from Sligo met Ned one day and asked him, how are things? And the conversation went, not too bad, master. They're all gone. There's only the boss, myself and the missus left. But he lived in Boyle in latter years in Marion Road and was always in good form. I would visit him most mornings, make sure everything was okay, and he eventually died sometime in the late 70s.
Right. And did he ever work with your father in the business?
Never did a day's work in his life. But he was a very positive, very friendly, very gentle person. And the two of them just got on very, very well.
And the role of a town crier, James, did you know, was he paid for that role? Or was it as you said, maybe he didn't work too much, but was it a paid role or was it a volunteer role?
It was a volunteer role.
Right. And there's something I came across as well, quotes, hear ye. That's how the town crier back in the day would kind of announce that they have something to say.
Yeah.
Was that the case with Ned? Was he...
Come all ye people from Boyle.
Had he one of them sandwich boards on him?
No.
Or he would just read something from a piece of paper?
Yeah.
Do you have any memories yourself of him on the streets?
I can remember seeing him on the streets in Sligo.
Okay.
Coming down O'Connell Street in Sligo. But I don't remember what the dialogue would have been or what the text would have been, but he was able to get the control of people.
Obviously, that's the most important part, is for people as a town crier to listen.
I also remember being with him. He came to one of the Fleadh Cheoils in Cloners, I think it was. We lost him on the second day. We couldn't find him. And about Thursday or Friday the following week, he appeared in the Royal Hotel. Well, Ned, were you at the Fleadh? I was. Was the crack good? It was. Did you have any drink? Oh, I had a few. He was a gentle person who had no evil in him or no hate in him whatsoever. He was just very, very friendly.
And he had a bell that he used to ring.
He had a bell, brass bell.
Brass bell. That would have been for the town to have access to that bell, or you don't know where is it lost?
I have no idea.
No idea.
Unfortunately.
Which is a shame. I think something like that, a piece of memorabilia like that, would have been nice for the town to have on show somewhere, maybe in King House or somewhere like that. But I was very interested in hearing about the town crier, and I was going to try and find someone in town that had a bit of information about it. But you filled in that gap. Lovely, so you have. So moving a bit forward, James, you then set up a cash and carry in Boyle back in, what year was that?
Back in 1980.
And I can still, it was located on where Joe Simon's premises is now.
Correct, yeah.
I always remember playing it up at the train station in the 80s, and I always remember looking over that direction. It was, as far as I remember, it was a green out building, I think.
There was a green building there, but we built another building for the cash and carry. Yeah. And I think I should refer you to what happened, or the reason why we moved to up there was in 1980, there was a series of serious fires around the town. The Royal Hotel, church, school, and our business was burned down.
In Patrick Street?
In Patrick Street.
Right.
And it was always suspected there was an arsonist in the area.
Okay.
But never
proven.
Never proven. There was, the Hurl Works was another one.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Now, what time frame were them fires, if you can remember?
In the 1980, late 70s, early 80s.
So maybe in a period of maybe 4 or 5 years, there was them big fires in prominent businesses.
In about 2 years.
Yeah, that's a very big coincidence.
And it was devastating. It started in our case in one of the trucks down at the bottom end of the warehouse, and the whole warehouse building in Patrick Street was burned down. And I can remember trying to get into the shop, and the door slamming behind me, and I thought I was trapped.
So you were actually there?
I was there when we were trying to get the fire sorted out. So when the dust settled, as it were, we rebuilt a warehouse on Station Road.
That Station Road is where where I was referring to, where Joe Simon's. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, and I remember the name as well. I can remember Keen Cost. I can always remember that sign. And back then, obviously, as a kid, I didn't actually know what that building was, but I always remember seeing the sign.
Indeed.
Setting up that business, you did deliveries locally as a cash and carry, or was it further afield, maybe outside of the region, Connacht, or was?
We did deliveries at a radius of about 40 miles of Boyle.
40.
Mainly to small country shops.
And had you many staff?
We had about 30.
A lot of another nice sized business as well back
Indeed.
in the day. And was there any dinner dances associated with that business?
No.
None.
Chamber of Commerce would have been the closest association we had with them.
Setting up that business, were there any hurdles to overcome? As maybe nowadays you have a lot of planning permissions and stuff like that, but back then was there equally?
No, we had no hassle. We were serving a fairly good business for the town, and it was in a nice, quiet area which wouldn't have been disturbing anybody.
You said you moved the business there as a result of that fire in,
yes.
in Patrick Street. What happened to that building after the fire? Did it become another business after that or something, or was it just left?
It was just left.
And it has been since then to
correct.
Present day. Okay.
Yeah.
That's because I didn't know, was there another business in there after?
No.
All right, okay. Also, with the cash and carries, you also went on and opened up 2 other cash and carries elsewhere.
One in Castlebar and the other in Tullamore.
And the same premise, you were probably serving a radius around each of those
yes,
as well.
But they were strictly cash and carry with no transport involved.
Oh, so businesses would just come in and there was no deliveries?
Yes.
Okay. What would be the reason in maybe not doing the delivery service on them ones and doing it in Boyle? Just a preference?
Well, Boyle had an existing wholesale business around the country. Right. The cash and carry was in addition to it and was specific to grocery shops, whereas the other were delivering animal feed, were delivering flour, were delivering to catering establishments.
So then you had some local involvement in Boyle later on then, in the years, you were involved in the Chamber of Commerce. Was that something you were actively involved in? I know the Chamber of Commerce would have had a different role as it would have had, modern day. It wouldn't have had as much. It had a lot more input in the last few years in town as it would have maybe back then, or was that not the case?
Basically, it was a commercial, social organisation where you had shopkeepers and businesses who would attend meetings of the Chamber of Commerce. And one example I would give would be when the government were proposing to bypass Boyle to improve the transport to Sligo. The Chamber of Commerce were asked for what they thought of the bypass, and could anything be done to improve the service, to improve the business in Boyle because of the bypass. So we had a meeting with the county council, and I suggested to them that they would possibly bring the navigation of the river closer to town, so that the tourist traffic that's coming on up the river could get into town easily. And as a result, the Boyle Canal was built.
Right. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so that was that
was my idea,
right,
via the Chamber of Commerce.
So that was directly as a result of your suggestion.
Yes.
The Chamber took it on board, brought it to the council, and that moved out. That's pretty impressive. That's because it's a lovely feature down there, the canal.
Oh, absolutely. And people get great pleasure out of walking up and down it.
And not only that, but as you said, it brings some potential tourism more or less into the half kilometre from the town, which is a great feature. I'm just looking at a photo here of yourself and your wife at a black tie event. I presume that was one of those famous black tie chamber dances back in the 80s, was it?
70s and 80s.
70s and 80s.
Yeah.
Okay. And they were big dues as well. Oh,
very much. We got married in 72, and we've been going to Chamber of Commerce dances for 20 years after that.
And they were so popular and glamorous as well,
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And it's a pity as you see time moving on that those kind of traditions are now lost. Like chambers don't have those kind of events anymore, and I think the town does suffer as a result.
Oh, without doubt.
And I think it's a nice feature to have, but better to have had them back then than not have them at all, I suppose. What other local involvements did you have, James, that you can talk about?
I was involved with Boyle Celtic from the time it started, and I played centre half for Boyle Celtic for 1966 to 1989. Really enjoyed life there.
Yeah, so you would have played when obviously Boyle Celtic was in the Roscommon League.
Yes.
And then in, I think, was it 86, they moved to the Sligo Leitrim?
That was before my time, or after my time.
After, right, okay, yeah. And who would have been on the team back then, can you recall?
Well, the first man, and he only died recently, was Hal Cawley.
Oh, yes, Hal.
And Hal was for centre half. Let's see, Liam Cairns, Sean Fox, Bernie Tansey, Adrian Wynn,
Johnny Greenan, would that
Johnny
be?
Greenan.
Jerry Emmett, I think.
Jerry Emmett later on. In fact, Jerry was one of the two people I could never get on top of. He was a brilliant footballer.
Really? Oh, he'd love hearing that now, so he would.
He had perfect. There was two people I could never really dominate playing centre half. He was one, and the other was a fellow from Castlereagh named, so I forget his name now, but he was like a bull, and he just couldn't take the ball off him. But I had a great life playing football for Boyle Celtic.
Did you win? I can't remember.
We won nothing in those days.
But it was, as you said, it was a good time.
Yeah. In the second last year before I finished, we ended up in the Roscommon Cup final, and it went to 3 replays, and we were beaten 2-1 on penalties in the end, and we were actually mentioned in the Irish Independent.
And who would have been the manager? Or
Tom Dooley.
Tom Dooley. That's right, because Tom Dooley, and I think, wasn't it Paddy Hatter, were one of the originals that set up the Boyle Celtic.
That's right.
It was Paddy down in the pleasure grounds. I think something about asked stewards for permission to use some of their land or something.
No,
was it not?
The pleasure grounds was a walking area which was for members of Boyle Tennis Club.
Okay.
It was mainly a Church of Ireland group.
Right.
And over the years, the use of the pleasure grounds by those people declined, and it was lying derelict for a number of years. And one of the projects that the Boyle Chamber of Commerce took on was to build a swimming pool. And I was put in charge of that project, and I got access to the pleasure grounds to hold dances to raise money for the swimming pool. Now, we never succeeded in getting sufficient money, but because we got the access to the dances, the pleasure ground was opened up to the general public.
Okay, so it wasn't prior to that. It wasn't open. It was just for the tennis club.
Yeah.
And prior to that, it was something to do with, wasn't it the gentry of King House?
Yes.
You know, it was an enclosed area, because I even notice on the wall of the pleasure grounds, there's kind of, the stone has engraved in the stone, if you like, is kind of where they used to have the metal gates that used to block off for members of the public. I remember
Indeed.
John Gallagher was telling me about that. So there was like railing so that you couldn't get inside that fence. Also, the gala festivals, which I have a very strong memory of when I was growing up, were a big feature of the town back in those days. You had the gala festivals, the football, the five-a-sides in Boyle Celtic, if you remember.
Yeah.
Were they organised by the Chamber of Commerce?
No, they were organised by a group called the Round Table, which were basically young professional and business people under the age of 40. Yeah. And I actually set that up as well.
Gala festivals, I think, for me, are just some of my fondest memories of growing up. They were such a significant time, like seeing 4 deep along the wall at the pleasure ground alone.
Indeed.
Of people, and you'd have the five-a-side games on, and then everyone would rush to get into the pubs back then.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So you had an active hand in that too.
Indeed.
That's brilliant. So it is. Obviously, you did a lot of cycling back in the day. I presume was the cycling club set up back then?
Cycling club only was set up in the early 2000s. Yeah,
I thought maybe it would be even a bit before that, and you were actively involved in that.
I was a member, and we went to France on one occasion, and I organised a trip for them. And I used to do the Maracycle every year, which was Belfast, Dublin, Dublin, Belfast.
I think as well, you were involved in the twinning of Boyle.
I was involved with that, and
yeah.
We got involved with a town called Saint-Witz outside Paris, and we developed quite close friendships with a number of people in Saint-Witz, and so much so that we could send our children over during the summer to learn French, and that went on for a number of years, and eventually just died a natural death. But we had very close friendship with the French people. So
it used to be they come over and Boyle would go over to
Saint-Witz.
Right, and that was for a number of years. And that was great as well back in, even, what year was that roughly?
Saint-Witz would have been late 70s, early 80s.
Okay, so and that was great because back then obviously it was a good activity or a good occasion to have, so that, as you said, your kids could go over, anyone else's kids could go over, and vice versa come over, and they could learn English, they could learn French.
Yeah.
You mentioned as well to me before that you were involved in the angling club.
Right.
Could you talk a bit about that?
And the angling club developed over a period of years, and they organised a very popular angling festival every year, which would have been one of the biggest fishing competitions in the country. I'd always been doing a bit of angling when my father was alive, and I fished the mayfly for trout and fish for pike during the late summer and throughout the winter. One year, the Irish record was broken by a member of the Boyle Angling Club. He caught a pike of 40 plus pounds weight. And I remember the same year I had caught an 18-pounder, and I came in very pleased with myself. I said, I reckon if this thing won, you have another 20-odd pounds to get before you're in with the chance.
Yeah.
But about 2 years later, I won the competition with a 26-pounder.
Even bigger?
No, 26.
26, sorry, he was 40.
As opposed to 40. But Michael Egan got the Irish record for years.
So it was he got it and then it wasn't broken for
until about 10 years ago. But it was a massive competition.
And they still have their competitions. They're still very big.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
COVID knocked it on the head for a couple of years, but it's come back again.
Yeah. Oh, and it always was. Even before COVID, it was always a big,
absolutely.
big deal. And a very, by all accounts, a very well-run affair as well.
Indeed.
What haven't I asked you, James, that I should have? Is there anything you'd like to add?
Married, soccer, champion, commerce, retired. Well, yeah, of course, I got married.
That's obviously, we probably should bring that into the conversation.
No, going back to reference when I was starting in Belfast, I was asked, did I know a big Clark? I married a girl called Kathleen Clark, who was the daughter of that big man. A neighbour across the road from us in Patrick Street, I didn't know her then, and we courted for about a year. We have 6 children, and we have had more than 50 years happy marital bliss.
Absolutely. It's so important as well, because...
absolutely, yeah.
When it comes down to it, family life is everything.
Indeed, absolutely. 2 other things I'll bring up. One is I had quite a number of injuries to my leg playing football. I had 2 cartilages taken out of my right leg, 1973 and 77. And after doing 4 marathons, I eventually ended up having the joint replaced, which is standard enough procedure. But the joint got infected because I had an abscess tooth while on holidays. And I had to have 2 more replacements after that. So I was the first person in the world to have my knee joint replaced 3 times. And an interesting thing about it was I'd been told by one of the top surgeons in Dublin that I'd either have the leg taken off or straightened. And Dr. Loftus, who was my wife's GP, rang me one day to say she knew fella had come back from the States with a new technique and I should go to him, even though I wasn't her patient. This gentleman called Fleadh Cheoil, took me on and over a period of a year replaced the joint 3 times.
3 times.
And had been, finally in 1996, I was clear and I've been okay ever since.
And have you any pain or anything in that knee?
No.
Since that's great then.
He reckoned it lasted about 20 years. And a year after I had it done, I rang him one day. I wanted to know, could I do the Maracycle? What do you think we put that joint in for? And what happens if it wears out? We put in another one. So that was that. And the other one I mentioned is my son James, who was living in Brussels, had some Polish men doing some work for him. And they disappeared for about 6 weeks at the height of the summer. They went to Mongolia. And quote is the words, he said, Dad, you never wouldn't believe the fishing that they had. We have to go. So we went the following year and we fished in Mongolia. We had a fantastic period of time. I got one fish, 28 pounds weight, called a Taimen, T-A-I-M-E-N. It was like a salmon with a pike mouth on it.
It's not a place I would have heard anyone going fishing.
We were camped with a Russian driver and a Mongolian guide. And the Russian driver was an ex-Russian soldier. They looked after us. All we had to do was arrive, camp, tents up, have something to eat and go fishing. There was only one day we got no fish, and that was the day where there was a gold mine about 100 kilometres up the way. And the gold miners polluted the river and killed everything.
And have you done much travel in your lifetime, James? Have you been?
I've been to Africa. We got married in 72. We went on a honeymoon to Kenya. We were on the Indian Ocean coast. I just can't think of the name of it now. I've been to Norway, Sweden fishing. Represented Ireland at a competition.
You represented Ireland fishing?
With my friend Bodo Funke. In Norway, the World Predator Championship. And I can remember catching a fish off the island that was a massacre the year before. I fished in a few other places. I've been in Scotland, England, France, Switzerland, Germany.
So you've got to see a good selection of the of the world through fishing?
Absolutely, yeah.
And would they be long trips? Would you go for...
Well, the ones to Norway and Sweden would have been about 2 weeks each time. The other one just happened to be where I was coming from, various places.
Okay.
I was involved with the Scout movement for a good few years back in the 1980s, early 1990s. I got a group set up in the venture category in the latter years, and we had some great experiences. We went cycling to France twice. First time going to Sandwich via Paris, and the second time going to Crozon via through Brittany.
And was there I heard, I think in Boyle there was some presentation given in Creighton's a while ago.
Yeah, the presentation was organised by a number of the ventures, for myself and Dermot Lahafe, Danny Tiernan and Chris Callan. Dermot and I got two plaques which were made from very nice timber with very complimentary text for me. There were on the night there were about half of one of the troops present. There was Kieran O'Reilly, Adrian Regan, Shane Feely, John Moran, Jerry Flynn, Peter Perry, Edward Conroy and Niall Sheeran. And we had a very pleasant night reminiscing about all the experiences in France and in Germany.
And it's nice to get recognised as well from your work and dedication over the years to be recognised in the town for that.
Well, it came out of the blue and it was a very lovely presentation and a lovely sensation on the night. Adrian and Kieran prepared a slideshow showing all the activities that we were on, and it brought very worthwhile memories back to me.
Exactly, lifelong memories.
Yeah.
As I said, it's lovely that they recognised not only yourself but the rest of that group for their efforts.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because I remember the Boy Scouts back in the day, and it was a great organisation up there at the complex. I think that's where it was in my day. Yeah, it was a great facility and a great outlet for young fellas to, learn a few different skills and just be a part of
learning the skills and taking part in activities.
Yeah,
and it kept them out of trouble, and in a couple of cases I reckon it changed their lives. The other interest I have in life is languages.
Languages?
Yeah. I learned Spanish in school, learned German on Linguaphone, French because of Sandwich, Russian because I was a bit of Russian because we needed it for the Mongolian trip, and I'm trying to learn Italian at present.
You can speak Spanish, German, French and Russian at a decent level? Spanish
and German, decent level. French not too bad. Russian minimal, and Italian we're working on.
Pimsleur, I think, was a very popular Pimsleur.
I haven't heard of that one. No.
Yeah, and there's another one, Michel Thomas, who was another. I think he had a like yourself, a lot of languages under his belt.
Yeah.
And nowadays with Italian, what are you using for that?
Duolingo. I did Italian also with Mary Hanmore Cawley for best part of 5 years. We started in the Family Life Centre, and then during COVID we did it on Zoom. She also combined it with music and classical music and Italian. But a very relaxing and very open-minded session once a week for months at a time.
And was it an hour a session or longer?
It could go up to 2 hours.
2 hours.
But we found it great fun to hear other people talking Italian and making Italian conversation. And
were you talking over Zoom to each other, asking each other Italian questions and answering in Italian back?
Yes.
Was that part of it? Very, very interactive then?
Well, very much so. and a big spread of different people. Yeah.
There's not too many people in Boyle now, I think, would be able to hold a conversation in a few languages.
And some of them are basic enough. The other thing that might be of interest to you, the house we're living in now was built in the 1880s by the head steward in Rockingham. Our next door neighbours, stewards, this house, Mannion's and Pat Brogan's house, were all built by the same man at the same time. And the man that arrested Roderick Casement ended up living in this house.
Okay.
He was Superintendent Kearney. And he was transferred from Kerry to Boyle after he had arrested Casement. And at some stage, he was asked by Michael Collins to get involved in setting up the Garda Síochána. And one of the Republican members of the Dáil asked the questions, what was a servant of the Crown doing, setting up the Garda Síochána. He had to leave Boyle overnight and never came back.
All right.
And about 10 years ago, members of his family came back here and had spent a day walking around the property.
And was your father born in this house, or?
He was born in Patricktree, but my grandfather owned the house at the time and he had rented it to this man Kearney.
Okay.
So that's about all my...
Perfect. Well, as I said, James, thank you very much for inviting me into your house and having this talk. I think it's a great chat and it's another voice of Boyle recorded for posterity, which I think is very important. So thank you very, very much.
No, thank you, Karen.
So that's it for this episode, folks. I hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as I enjoyed recording it. If you like the content, we'd really appreciate it if you could share it. You can follow us on Facebook by searching for Voices of Boyle, and you can also contact us on our website by visiting voicesofboyle.com. We're always looking for new guests, so if you'd like to be on the show, or if you know someone who you'd like to join us, please reach out to us via our Facebook page or website. Thanks very much, and we'll chat to you again soon.